Yeah, welcome. Thanks for having me. I will talk about communicating game design. So I'm a game designer. So this talk is about how should I implement that? Why is it red? Um, Stupid game designer. We saw that already in the previous talk. This is obviously an issue. This presentation is a beta, so it's kind of a first. Okay, to be honest, it's an alpha. To be super honest, it's a pre-alpha, but it's really good because for you it's an early access, you know? So you see this the first time. So I have some things I test out the first time, and I'm hoping this working with the setup, so because I have some older prototypes with me, and sometimes that makes issue with different screens and stuff. But we will try out. So I try to make a fast introduction. So basically, I don't want to talk too much about who I am, but what projects I did. So I started from rescue service 20 years ago. So I was not in the game business, and for me, game business was like going to Hollywood, becoming an actor. So like. Nobody's doing that. That's not possible. So in my time, when I started this, there were no schools or something like that, and it was super hard to get a job there. Even you don't know where they were. There were no internet to figure out where the companies are located. So this is a kind of area I came from. So I studied engineering. I didn't finish it. And then during my studies, I became tester for Blue Byte, which is a company in Germany doing strategy games, and I thought it's a very wise idea when you have kids and family and wife to earn money with. My wife is just laughing right now. So we had a tough time when I started in game business. So I worked on several titles like Battle Eye. I did a lot of Settlers, so level design, game design there. There were a lot of different versions. I did a small game which I really liked with the art we had with one programmer. We had kids, which is kind of a project. So Settlers 5, then I did several add-ons for Settlers 5. I was building puppets, which influenced me a lot. Then Settlers 6. I was in Morocco for some time and worked on those titles for a short time, which was really cool. Then I started sailing. So I switched to Anno, which is another big brand in Germany, did V and DS versions. Then I did a lot of prototypings. iPhone 1 came out, and we were lucky to be one of the first games released there. And then Blue Byte asked me to work on a project. It was a project about sports, and they called it My Fitness Coach Club. And we thought it's this, but they wanted that. So then I was something like 15 years around in the business and decided to leave and go. Mobile games were just coming up. I had really fun making this one mobile game. In a small, especially because it was a small team. My motivation was to work in smaller teams, so I left Blue Byte really sadly. So that was my last day. But I joined a big startup that had some good funding, and we were like this amount of people and starting making mobile games. The company is called Flare Games, still existing, is a publisher in Germany now, and became pretty big. So I left again. So I worked on different games there, like Brave Smart is a match 3 game with a building app strategy, and Ocean Tower was actually a pretty good game. It came out, was successful, and each update we made it worse. So we didn't understand the audience at all. We thought we are making it better, but each update, it's like it was dropping. Royal Revolt was a very good game, and it was done with the same team I worked together with when we did Anno for Wii and DS. And there is a second version out now, and this is pretty successful. And Throne Wars was a kind of this kind of browser game that you play as a massive multiplayer on a mobile game. After that, I worked for several companies on different sides, so as a creative director, but also doing level design for some companies. And helping some publishers to get into the digital market. In 2014, I co-founded a subsidiary of Dedelic, which is a publisher in Germany and developer. And I did the game called The Long Journey Home. It's a space exploration game where you start with 4 people, make the first light jump of mankind, and then you try to figure out how to come home. It's a roguelike. It's super hard. And it's about telling stories procedurally. Yeah. So that was my last game I did, and this year, after that, I was working as a game scout and was looking for good partnerships. And this year, I took over the management part of the Indie Arena booth. It's the biggest independent game booth on a show. So we have 1,000 square meters. This year, we had over 30 different countries there with over 86 games. So it's a pretty big thing, and the cool thing here is you can, and I have some people sitting here who attended us, they are here too. So it's a pretty cool thing because it's like we are stronger when we get together. So okay, now you know a little bit my background and can see why communication for me is an important thing, even if you do something like the Indie Arena booth. So first of all, what's the problem? First of all, the idea is not a game. So actually everybody here who has an idea for making a game? Yes, okay, that's nearly everybody. You have? Okay, so we can talk afterwards. So everybody has a lot of ideas. Some of them are articulated. So maybe even someone doesn't raise his hand but knows, yeah, I have an idea, but I'm not ready to tell it. I don't even raise my hand. But it's so some of them get articulated. Even fewer turn into something like prototypes. Even fewer became a complete game, and even fewer get published, which is. I just reviewed my my presentation, and the very few actually published sounds like currently a lot of games got published. So what you can see is when you work as a game scout, or when you try to figure out what's coming next and what's working on, then you have few turned into prototypes. You can see, you can try to imagine what a publisher has problems right now to figure out which of this big amount of games that are done are worth the time of the player, the publisher, etc. So communication of that or documentation is kind of important. So first of all, too much text is boring. This is actually a document I wrote for level design, which is Settlers 4 Mission CD2, the Trojans. So this is a real document. I also have the game design document of Settlers 3D, which were Settlers 5. So it was the first 3D game we did. And this document was 500 pages. So absolutely ridiculous. You don't do that. Actually, I think besides me and the producer, nobody read it. So it got not updated. It had a lot of issues. There were two parts in the game that were in the document that were actually used. This is a flowchart of the logistics of the game, and there is I don't remember kind of list. Another problem with these documents is they are poorly written. You can't read that, it's German, but it also makes no sense in Lithuania or in Ukraine, right? Whatever. So it's really about describing something with words where you can have much better means than with written words. So most documents get lost when they don't have a clear home. That's also a problem with documentation. Another one, I think every programmer, who's a programmer here? Developers, raise your hands. Who's an artist? Okay, so everybody knows that, right? So we have this final, super final, final 02 kind of document. So that's, I hear a lot of laughing, so you know what I'm talking about. It's still an issue. The other thing is when you have documents, they often have an inconsist level of detail. So that was true for my document, for example. There were some parts that were like, okay, I have the formula here. Program it with this formula. And then you had something like, something is happening here. So this is kind of a problem. And the problem is also that you, as a designer, lose your credibility with this. So logical flaws are discouraging. So if you have different things and they have different meanings, then you are somehow have somehow a problem. So how do we solve that? First of all, make better designs. That's the question how to do that, but I will go into that a little bit later. Clearly express your design. That's something we want to talk about. So we talk about communication. Think about your audience when you document and communicate something. It's not always the same. So when I'm talking to you, it's a different level. If I talk to a programmer, I'm an in-depth problem of the game, and it's also true if, for example, in the middle is Henning, a friend of mine. He's an artist, obviously. You talk with him differently than I would talk with a straightforward programmer who just wants to know the facts. To be polite, producers is not like that. Producers is like that. But you know that. So most of the stuff I'm talking about is actually not very hard. So most of the stuff is just like thinking about it logically. So to go into it, I use a metaphor so you get an idea about different problems when we talk about the game. Let's use a tree. When when we want to describe a tree, we can describe the structure. Like, okay, we have limbs, we have the main stem, we have roots, we have the trunk, we have leaves. As human beings, we objectify. We see an object and we can describe it. That's the easy part. But the parts are a snapshot, especially when it comes to systems. So, you know, the tree is currently like that, but in a few hours, he's maybe not like that anymore. So we have dynamics. So a tree changes, seasons. So how to do that? That's cyclic. So it's completely different than a snapshot. So we not describe the structure anymore. Like, okay, this is a leaf. This is the current status of the leaf. We want to describe how it gets from one state to another. Or when you think about the life cycle, then it gets even more chaotic. So this is hard to documentate, and it's hard to communicate because it's not our nature. You know, we live in snapshots. We don't live. It's hard for a human being to experience time. So let's do it really abstract. So our world, everything we do, and also the game is made of really, really small building pieces. And some of them are kind of related to each other, and maybe they build systems. And the systems, we have several systems, and they can live with each other, or they communicate with each other. And the same with the game. So we have this kind of really small parts, we have bigger parts, we have assembled parts, and then we have something like a super part. So if you see that, we can let's think about layers. So first, when we take it from the real world, we start with, okay, here's physics, really basic physics, and we have chemistry, we have biology, and we have the mind. So you can transfer that to the game and say, okay, we have physics, we have peoples and vehicles, we have missions and situations, and we have story, and we have game arc. So if you begin to think like that, then it's much easier to find out on which granularity level you're currently talking about. So Gears of War, for example, have a mission system, and then there are different gameplays, which kind of a combination of different mechanics like aim and shoot, reload, chainsaw, inventory management, etc. And then I can even go further, and that's where game design starts and gets interesting. So what skills does a player need? What inputs does a player has to do? What are the parameters that change it from easy to difficult? So here we have a high granularity, and if I talk with a producer or with a publisher about the game, maybe I shouldn't start there. So we have the entities, that's what I talked, so the leaf, the water bottle, whatever, and we have the connections, which is dynamics. So that's really important to understand, structure versus dynamics. And I don't talk about structure because we are pretty good in that. So every human being is pretty easy to describe what he's seeing, even if it's digital. So I want to talk about how to describe dynamics. First of all, by diagrams. So I want to show just like different ways how to communicate something like this dynamics. And the first one is, let's talk about Pong. Do you know Pong? Someone knows Pong? Yes. It's a pretty well-known game. It's quite old, but still, it's still the game I'm using when I check out a new engine. I first program a Pong, because when I did that, I know every parts I need, like UI, physics, controls, input, etc. So it's pretty good to do such a small thing to test out complicated things. So we do it here also. So for Pong, first of all, we can list the elements, which is a bat, a ball, a wall, and a goal. So that's everything Pong consists of. So what's the relationship between those? To do this, I want to introduce you to a matrix, and a matrix, for example, is also very good to show distances between cities in a most effective way. So Vilnius, Berlin, Hamburg, Vohwinkel. Vohwinkel is a city where I'm coming from, and the only reason I have this slide is to show you I'm living in a nice city with a hanging terrain where we are famous for. Okay, over 100 years old. It's very cool. Come to us, visit us, go with that, that's good. Tell me when you're there. So metrics, when we take a look, I just checked that out. So Vohwinkel Vilnius, we flew 1,527 kilometers. So this is how we can very easily documentate the relationship between those cities. We can even reduce it, so this is more effective. And now we can do the same for Pong. So we have bat, ball, wall, and goal. So when I fill it out, the ball is deflected by the bat, the ball is deflected by the wall is stopping the bat, and when the ball hits the goal, it scores. So that's the whole documentation for Pong. Now I can go a little bit deeper, because every box is kind of an event. So for each event, I do not want to bore you too much, but you can go in detail and say, okay, for this event, this is a formula, I'm done. So I describe Pong. So Pong obviously is very simple. All things that are happening there are events, and most games are much more complex. And so we need to introduce states. So what is a state? Do you know what a state is? Who knows what a state is? Okay, so think about your day. So first of all, you're sleeping, and then you're washing yourself, and then you're drinking, and then you're working, or in another order. But that are different states, okay? That are the states you're in. So let's bring them in an order. Maybe yours is different, but some of us sleeping, then they're washing themselves, eating and drinking can happen in parallel for some of us. Then I walk, then I work. And an event changes the state. So when I'm sleeping, there is a wake up event, and then I'm confused. Okay, that's a different state. So let's try another complex game called Pac-Man. In Pac-Man, I have Pac-Man. I have the environment. I have the ghosts. I have the dots, energizers, and bonus tokens. Who have played Pac-Man? Okay, that's good. I try to use this kind of games because then most audience can follow instead of having a super specific modern one. In Pac-Man, ghosts have multiple states. Like they are hunting, they get hunted, or they are eyes. So when I do this metrics, I can think about all elements, and I can cross-compare, and then I can say, okay, Pac-Man is death when he meets a ghost. Ghost gets eaten event by Pac-Man when he's in the other state, etc. So I have all these events again listed, and now I can have the states in a flowchart, like okay, decision making, left, right, flowchart, an event, and Pac-Man flowchart would look like that. So I'm hunted. When I eat an energizer, I change the state, I get a hunter, and there's a timer when I get back to hunted. As long as I eat energizers, I keep being the hunter. So when I have the ghost collision, death event, when I'm hunted, and I have less than 0 lives, the game ends, otherwise it restarts. And now for the ghosts. So the ghost is the hunter. If the Pac-Man eats an energizer, he's hunted. As long as I get the energizer, he keeps the state. Otherwise, he falls back to being hunter. If he's rescued, he's going back to base. Otherwise, he gets eaten, he's going back to base. This both the matrix and this flowchart describes the whole game. So this is a very, very efficient and much different way than what I did in my first documents, like writing it. Okay, so Rami was here yesterday. He was saying that you have to use the medium that's most close to what you want to do. And a flowchart is much closer to programming the game than words are that you are writing. But let's talk about something more interesting to describe dynamics. It's prototypes. First of all industry makes prototypes. In my opinion, you should prototype in each stage, even if you have the feeling I know everything. I do the second game. I can tell you I did 3 games in a row in the same kind of brand. And I wished we had prototyped more because we always thought, no, we know it. Nah, it was each time different. So I think you don't need any money to make a prototype, but the prototype process is kind of fragile. So first of all, you have to figure out what kind of prototype you're doing. So is it a proof of principle prototype? It's a form study. Is it a working prototype that really proves how it's worked, or it's just a visual prototype? I show you now a prototype, and I hope it's working. It's a pretty old one. Let's try out if it's starting. So this is really the real thing. I have to figure out, here. Okay, so that was a prototype to figure out in a game. I will not talk which game. It was about building a city and you expand, and it was a test how to expand in different ways. So there was the old game where like, okay, you have cycles and you can build your building within the cycle. So when it's finished, I can only build within the cycle, and so I expand. Then we wanted to test out different ways to expand. So I switched to another player. First I have to build a main house, and this player could build in line of sight. So as long as you are in a certain radius, visible radius, you could build. So like here. And then it was immediately revealing, and then you could build there. So as long as the fog of war, how we call it, is gone, you can build, and here you can only build in certain kind of. And the third one was kind of an experiment. We had the idea, let's use streets, and let's use kind of length of streets. So when I build this one, and I build it's kind of hard to. It's not easy with a touchpad. Bear with me. So you could build with roads if it's a certain. And so we tried to figure out what's cooler and can we have maybe different kind of expansion models, etc. The problem was, let me see that I get back to my slide. So there were no clear goals. It was not judgeable by anybody. There were no input or production. There were no playtest possible. We couldn't sit someone in front of it and say play it because we didn't have a real question. And there were no iteration. So we worked on that thing, I think 3 weeks or something like that. So I wrote a document, the programmer was programming it, then he gave it to me, was totally frustrated, and I said like, yeah, it's kind of cool, we don't know. So the thing was just a waste of time. I give you an opposite example. I wanted to build a puppet, and actually the fabric was pretty expensive. So I didn't want to waste any like trying out with a real thing. So I made this little prototype there, and it was done like I don't know, half an hour. But as said, the fabric was expensive, so I was first doing this prototype 2 times, figuring out the sizes, and at the end, I had this lovely hand puppet from Day of the Tentacle, which is really operable hand puppet. So I had a clear goal. It was a rapid test. I reduced production costs a lot, and it helped me making some decisions. How to do details. I figured out how to make the eyebrow, etc. I did this all with a prototype. So that's a very good example of a prototype. But you don't need anything to make a prototype. Very often I hear from younger game designers, I have no graphic artist who can help me. I have no programmer who can help me. Actually, I wanted to express the happiness of settlers in a game, and I didn't have any artist, so I just make some pictures of myself. So actually, the funny thing is I totally forgot about that, and a friend of mine who was QA tester at Blue Byte posted that online something like 2 or 3 months ago. So yeah, okay, thank you. So playtests, that's important. If you do a prototype, you need to playtest it. You have to be able to sit someone else than you in front of it and see how he reacts on it. So you fail early and succeed sooner, hopefully. You want to meet face to face who you are designed for. So to sit beside someone playing your game is painful and helpful at the same time. But you need something functional and understandable. So playtests, I think that's the most important lessons I learned. You have always a feeling it's not ready. You are not ready to show it. That's not true. Show it as early as possible to someone and live with the feedback. And you have to interpret the feedback. And very often what people say after they made a playtest is not what you experience when you watch them playing it. So for example, we had someone for Anno V, he didn't find anything in the menu. He wanted to find a woodcutter, he couldn't find a woodcutter. And after the playtest, we asked him what he liked and what he disliked, and he completely forgot that. But he was super frustrated. The reason he forgot that is he figured it out during his playing, and it was like a success story for him, and the brain is pretty good in forgetting stuff. So he forgot. But for us, it was one of the most important things. And then I asked him, you had issues figuring out where the woodcutter is. What were you looking for? And then he said, oh, I thought the submenus were ordered in a way that you have production and refinery, and so he had another mindset of how the buildings are ordered. And actually, we made it the way he expected afterwards. So he gave us a very good tip about how to solve a problem, and he wouldn't have said that at all. So if we would have just questioned him, so for me as a designer, it's important to be there when you do a playtest. So my other experiment is this little game. So this is a, let me see, is it working? Okay, this is a prototype we did in Blitz Basic. When I find my mouse back, is it here? Is it here? Here. It's a prototype we did in Blitz Basic. That's the only language I had available there. It's pretty small. Can I make it bigger? No. It's a time management game. So we decided to the thing is, Christian and me, he's a programmer, I'm a designer, and we were put in a room and they had no project for us. So they said, prototype, do something, don't waste our money too much. So we bought an Apple, and the iPhone was just out, and we thought it's a pretty neat idea to try out this kind of funny mobile device with touch, which was kind of alien thing for us. So we had the luck to test stuff out there, and then we said, okay, we will not have a lot of artists or stuff, but we have Anno there, and they have a lot of artwork. So let's try to do a game with all the artwork they have that we just have to re-export it or stuff. So that was a basic idea. So we came up with a time management game. It was pretty easy. You have a harbor. Here's a harbor you can see. So here are different docks. And I can ask people to come in. So she's bringing 7 wood. I don't have wood here. I don't have stone. I don't have bread. I don't have money. And here's a timer running down. So what I could do is just like get them in here, and then they are unloading. So this bar is for unloading. And when they're ready, they tell me what they want. So let's see. So he wants stone. I don't have stone, and I only got wood in, which is kind of super stupid. And now she's getting pissed, so she will leave in a few seconds and not giving me any money. So who has stone? He has stone. So I try to get him. So you see, it's a management game about people getting pissed very fast. And what we tested out here is how a time management game works at all, what are the important parameters. So we had some really good outcomes. So first of all, how patient they are is something we needed. The maximum and minimum amount of goods. So for example, we figured out that with 2 different goods, it's too easy. With 3 is okay. With 4 is already pretty hard. With 5 is nearly unmanageable. So that's something we found out with a prototype. We found out modifier for payment, so who is paying more, who is paying less. And the most important thing is we figured out that surprising what they need. So our first prototype had a lot of information. So when they came in, they also shown what they want to have. So the first one would have shown, okay, I want 4 wood, but I want 6 stone. And it was really cluttered, a lot of information. And in the playtests we had with friends, they got confused because of all that. And then Christian said, oh, let's just remove what they want. We give it as a surprise when they come in. That was more kind of a UI issue. And then that became the most important part of the game. It makes the game much more interesting. So they were only bringing stuff, and only when they unload, they tell you what they need. In the background, we calculated what they need, that you don't have a deadlock and stuff. So we did a lot of stuff there, but that was really interesting because it came out from a prototype we did in, I don't know, 2 or 3 days. And then we iterated a week or something like that. So at the end, we had, yeah, that's what so at the end, as said, we didn't have any graphic artist, but we knew the graphics, so we picked, from our parameters, we know how to make the game easy and hard. We could pick the pictures or from the Anno database of artwork and put the ships, and then how they looked like and how they behaved were in line with the parameters. We also figured out in the prototype how we can make more variety with harbors. So like big ships and small ships. So big and small docks and blocking docks and box that are excluding, so you can either put 2 small or 1 big, or decaying docks. So we could find out basic layout, and we knew what was hard and what was easy. So we could easily make something like, okay, first harbor is only about small and big, the next one is big and blocking, the next one is small, big and decaying, and the rest one is combining them all. And what I'm most proud of is we had 1 artist with a really low budget, so we could draw the harbors, but we could draw them only once. We couldn't go back to him and ask him to redraw, at least not too often. So this is first one is PowerPoint, then this is 3ds Max, then this is the first overdraw of the artist to make kind of a proof of concept, and that's actually the final game. So the layout of the it doesn't change. So that was really, really cool. So it was one of the most productive, most efficient production I had when it comes to art. So what we also know, we knew all our parameters, like, okay, what kind of combination of small ships, getting pissed very fast, but having a lot of money, what amount of goods. So we knew our parameters and we knew our levels. So we tried to sort it out before making the game. We tried to sort it out. So our goal was to have something like, okay, it will be level based, so we will have something around 40 levels. And then we made this spreadsheet where we just said where we want to introduce what. So we knew from playtests the docs already, we knew how hard the different ships and people will be, we knew that the amount of different goods have a big impact on it. So we made this big spreadsheet, and when someone tested the game and we figured out, oh, they didn't understand that you have to upgrade your dog, let's move a tutorial step before that. Before even touching the game and changing anything, we could do it in the table and see, oh, when we do it there, then we have too much stuff there, so it's really, really packed. So the conclusion of this content table was we had a learning curve with not too much try and error. We had always a good overview. It was actually our main documentation. This document you saw is the real thing. So we use this as a main documentation. We had the feeling we do not overwhelm too early, we didn't waste our content, and we could test stuff on paper. And after that, we created our asset list from that and told someone to export the stuff we needed. So, what about prototypes? So first of all, what's the learning? First of all, be relevant. So pick the right prototype, as you have seen. Be modest. Even if you are long in the industry and have done a lot of games, I still have the feeling you should start with a prototype. Because if you want not just to copy a game, but to make something new, even if it's just a small change, you will be surprised what it can mean. Be smart. So first clone, use standards, and then replace step by step. I think it's not a good idea to do like we did with the expansion prototype, like let's try something completely new on all areas, because then you have no idea anymore. Be quick. So use a prototype. For a prototype, you can use actually anything. Even digital, not digital, whatever. I think one thing I didn't mention when I talked about the expansion prototypes, the reason it didn't work, it was not close enough to the camera. So, for example, when you looked at that and you could see the radius and where you can go, it's so abstract, it's so far away from what the game will look like that you get no knowledge out of that. If we would have done the same thing with a kind of camera 3D, where we could figure out how far is the camera away, what is the area you can see, what is the distances that's good for the mouse, then we would have at least have some kind of outcome. But it was abstract, it had no goal, so that was really a problem. And it was actually, at the end, it wasn't quick. So that's the reason why I'm mentioning it here. Be quick doesn't mean like taking a shortcut. Be open, so you need playtests, you need to have to listen, prioritize. So first of all, you want to start with what's the core of your game and not like with side things. Besides, you have done the game already and you're basically trying to do something with side things. You have to iterate. So if you do the prototype once and then it's done, it was not really a prototype. So it's a good sign if you keep working on the prototype. And if you come in the situation to say, oh, this is so close to the game now, should we keep working on the prototype and it becomes a game, or do we restart again? I only did it once, that the prototype became the game, and that was my last game. The Long Journey Home started really as a prototype, and we replaced step by step each prototypish part by the real thing. But that was the reason we used Unreal, and we prototyped in blueprints in the visual thing, and then we changed to C++. Each part where we were sure it is set now. You have to focus. You have to remember why you're doing it. I did several prototypes where at the end we said, this is super cool. And then, oh, it doesn't fit to the game at all. So that can happen. And then you have to decide if you're doing the right game. I don't know how many people know that, but Assassin's Creed was actually Prince of Persia. And they tried to do a prototype and tried to figure out something new, and they found this crowd control where you can sneak through the crowd and do the stuff, and it felt very well, but was not in line with the brand IP. So with the IP, so they decided to do a new game. It was not the worst decision. When it comes to how to prototype, there's Game Maker, which is not complicated. Nearly everybody knows about Unity. Unreal has a very good system for that. I personally, big fan currently of Godot, which is kind of a new engine. It's an open source engine, 15 people working on it. When you download it, it's only 20 MB, and it's pretty good to learn. You have a good tutorial, so check it out. I think it's an upcoming engine. It can do 2D and 3D. I managed to do a small jump and run within 6 hours. I didn't do the art, but I could really manage to change the controls and could make a level with tile sets and stuff. So it's really amazing. And compared with Unity and Unreal, it's kind of you don't open an object and have 2,000 checkboxes where some of them don't work together, and you have to figure that out by yourself. So Godot is really lean. Still in development. You can use an own script there, but they implemented now C#. It's not completely finished. It's crashing, and the debugger is not working yet, but I'm pretty sure they will end that this year. Or you do paper prototypes. So for the Indie Arena booth, we decided to make this arcade light stands. So actually, this was the first prototype we did, and we figured some cool stuff out there. For example, it was too high for kids. When you are too tall, you were looking on the front plate. So making this on paper, it looked very good. And then we made this cardboard prototype, and then we figured out it didn't work. And then we changed it, and so it became that. And Victronome is one of the games that's also here, by the way. Really cool game. So conclusion. Diagrams and spreadsheets are better than text. Prototypes are better than diagrams. Fail often and early. Keep an overview of your content. Don't expect it to be perfect. That's one thing. I'm saying it more for me than for you, because I always try to make it better than it is. So at the end, it means use your brain, be brave, and that's it. So this is inspired by Will Wright. If you know Will Wright, he's done something like The Sims. And Brian Cameron and Alexander are from Ubisoft. They did a talk about communication, which inspired me. So I think, is this the time for the talk, or is this the time already for the questioning?
This is the time for you.
Oh, that's cool. So I'm in front of time. That's really unusual. Normally So we have time for questions if you have.
Yes. So, okay, we see some.
Hi, I have a question about playtesting.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, playtesting with family and close friends doesn't always give the best results. So how do you get random people to play a game?
So for Long Journey Home, we had the same issue. And we go to a university. We put a paper on the university and say you get a free code when game's coming out. We had the luxury that we're working with a publisher, so they gave us some codes for the games already existing. So we asked random people in university. For us, it helped. It was really helpful to have people that have something to do with games, even with game development. That's always a danger that they get too deep into, and they really want to help you. But if you have a mixture of you have friends there and you have some experts there and some random people, we had a board game store below our office, and we went there and said, okay, who wants to come? And then we suddenly had a schedule of people. People are very open and will to ask. Go in the forum, open a Discord channel, go somewhere. I think it's easier than you thought. I find it more challenging to overcome this feeling of I'm not ready yet to show it. So I think that's a bigger challenge than to find people. So yeah. But I think yes, it's people directly around you don't want to hurt your feelings, and that can lead to false direction. For example, with Long Journey Home, something interesting happened. We had a Discord. We worked with Rock Paper Shotgun, so we had 2,000 people playing our closed beta, which is amazing. We had a Discord, and people were there hanging around, giving us feedback, and we had a good pipeline that once a week we made an update. I'm really sad that we didn't do early access because we were completely prepared for that. But we did this closed beta, and people in the Discord who gave us feedback were super kind, and we were really like, we had a feeling we get a lot of feedback, then we released the games, and it was much too hard. So what happened is that the people who found the game already too hard or had issues didn't tell us in Discord. So at the end, we had some kind of filter that we only had around us people who loved the game already. So from that learning, I think it's always good to look around and try to get people who are not your friends. But I think it's possible. I hope so. Someone else. Feel free.
Hello, I want to ask, how many prototypes do you usually have before releasing the final version?
Oh, that's hard to answer. That really depends highly on the game, and it depends highly on the type of game. So, for example, for Long Journey Home, we had a lot of iteration on the prototype, how the galaxy looks like. But we didn't had so much iterations on how you speak with the aliens. So it's a question of granularity. I cannot give a clear answer. I did this wait a second, do I have that here? I did this match 3 game, and my first prototype for that, wait a second, I think I can show it. The prototype for that was actually in PowerPoint, and that made already, I don't know how many iterations in PowerPoint before we have the seconds, I show that, give me just Folie ausblenden. Does this work? Oh, can I have the thing back? Cool. So for that one, I don't know how many iterations this has made. So I think it's I called it The Village, and I used Settlers 2 artwork, and it was just done on my couch table. And it was a game about people running around and dropping resources, like you have coal miners and you have woodcutters, and then you can swipe 3 of them, and then it makes a building. And so they keep running around. And when I made that, I figured out that in which order you execute the walking, and when it comes to the moment where the people don't have space anymore, is super crucial. And then only with this kind of paper or whatever digital prototype, I figured out you have to be able to replace. You have to be able to replace this little walker, because if he's get trapped, and then the game got stuck. And that's something I figured out just by prototype. So I think you know when you're ready. So you should go as far as you can, and then you have a list of either problems you have to solve, or ideas how to solve that.
Okay.
Anybody else, or are we done?
Oh, well, we have some. Well, we don't really have time anymore. So
okay.
If you have any more questions, you can meet Andreas in the hall and ask them.
You can also find me. You can write me an email there. You can find me on Twitter. Oh, my Twitter account is wrong. It's only GameDev. I changed that. And I sometimes I stream in English and German about the game development.
Okay.
So thanks a lot.
So give a round of applause for Andreas.